Imagine the raw data output of a single hospital over just 1 week. Thousands of pages of unstructured clinical notes, lab results, and histories. To catch every potential signal of disease, cancer registries cast a wide net across this information. This initial broad sweep is called case finding. It pulls from every department in a facility like this, aggregating surgery schedules, pathology reports, radiation therapy logs, and even emergency room records. But gathering the data is only the first step. To enter the National SEER Registry, these raw files must pass through a secondary, rigid filter, a strict digital gate known as reportability. The logic of reportability functions as a rule-based algorithmic threshold. It defines inclusion through a rigid set of parameters to preserve the statistical integrity of the entire national database. To understand how qualitative clinical records become quantitative epidemiological data, we have to map the exact decision tree algorithm used by SEER registrars. Before modern digital frameworks, tracking and coding these cases required massive amounts of manual labor and physical cross-referencing through endless paper archives. Today, the process relies on a strict logical hierarchy to process cases efficiently and accurately. This algorithmic framework rests on 3 core pillars: standardized behavior codes, site-specific topography exceptions, and programmatic filters for ambiguous terminology. Mastering this specific decision tree is how registrars take uncertain, highly variable clinical records and sanitize them into a standardized national dataset. Let's build the Boolean decision tree. At the very top is Node 1, our primary filter, the ICD-03.2 behavior codes. The baseline dataset begins with any valid case diagnosed since January 1, 1973. The first reportability trigger is behavior code /2, representing in situ cases. The second is code /3, capturing invasive cases. Both route directly to the reportable bin. The algorithm requires constant patching, issued as ICD-03.2 updates, to accommodate changing medical taxonomy. For example, PTLD transitions from a non-reportable /1 to a reportable /3, effective in 2025. Similarly, high-grade astrocytoma with pyloid features is patched as reportable, effective in 2023. The system relies on these standardized behavior codes to ensure a universal starting point before any exceptions are applied. Standard malignancy logic works for most cases, but fails on specific anatomical sites. This brings us to the exception gate. Here, specific topography filters invert the standard rules. First, the C44 topography exception for skin. Specific skin histologies, like basal cell carcinoma, are explicitly excluded and diverted to the non-recordable bin. A similar exclusion applies to the C53 topography for the cervix, specifically removing in situ carcinomas. Collection for cervical in situ cases stopped entirely after 1996 and was further restricted in 2018. The rule inverts for topographies C70 through C72, representing the central nervous system. For CNS sites, benign primary tumors, coded /0, and borderline tumors, coded /1, are strictly reportable. This mandatory inclusion covers specific sites across the meninges, the brain, and the spinal cord. Excluding high-frequency, low-morbidity skin cancers preserves the utility of the database. Conversely, aggressively tracking all of these CNS anomalies captures vital data on neurological morbidity that would otherwise be permanently lost. Outside of a perfect dataset, medical records often lack definitive histologic confirmation. Clinicians frequently rely on subjective descriptions. To process this uncertainty, the algorithm uses Node 4, the ambiguous terminology protocol. Take this sample radiology report. Mass on CT scan is consistent with pituitary tumor. The logic here is absolute. If an approved ambiguous term directly precedes a reportable diagnostic term, the registrar must accession the case. In our sample text, the phrase consistent with is an approved trigger term. The diagnostic term must be exact. For CNS sites, tumor is valid and reportable, while mass is rejected. Other approved lexical triggers include words like probable, the word presumed, or the word suspected. These are strictly separated from phrases that fail the parsing logic, like suggestive of, which cannot be used to accession a case. By standardizing these lists, the system removes subjective human guesswork. It provides a mathematical way to convert qualitative clinical uncertainty into objective data points. The final challenge arises when two clinical documents directly contradict one another. This is resolved by the discrepancy logic gate. Consider a mammogram report stating the tissue is suspicious for intraductal carcinoma. The parser reads the approved ambiguous term and flags it for inclusion. But a subsequent needle localization biopsy returns a definitive result, negative for malignancy. The rule dictates this definitive negative completely overrides the initial report, and the file is discarded. This hierarchy of evidence also imposes strict limits on cytology, the microscopic examination of cells in body fluids obtained from washings and smears. A case cannot be accessioned into the registry based solely on suspicious cytology. It requires further clinical confirmation. However, if the cytology is explicitly positive for malignant cells, such as a urine cytology positive for malignancy, it bypasses this restriction and is fully reportable. Within the registry's decision tree, tissue pathology holds veto power over any prior screening or ambiguous imaging. When we zoom out, the complete system architecture is visible. Thousands of raw clinical records pour in at the top and cascade downward through these strict nodes. The data first passes through the behavior code filters, extracting the baseline in situ and invasive malignancies. It then hits the topography exceptions, filtering out low morbidity skin cancers while pulling in borderline CNS anomalies. Finally, the remaining cases pass through the lexical text parser, systematically resolving ambiguous phrasing and clinical discrepancies. Reportability operates as a rigid data filtering pipeline, where decisions are governed by the established rules of the SEER manual. The cancer registrar operates as the human pilot of this logic gate, applying technical standards to maintain a standardized epidemiological record. The final output is a clean, mathematically precise separation of cases into an accessioned registry versus discarded files. This algorithmic consistency preserves the epidemiological signal across millions of patient records, ensuring that the national cancer dataset remains accurate and standardized.